Hi, I'm Stan Boltz. I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I work with the Soil Health Division out of our national office, and I cover the states of North Dakota and South Dakota. And here with me today is...
Hi, I'm Kent Vlieger, and I'm the State Soil Health Specialist here in South Dakota with the NRCS.
So we came out here today to Candace Mizera's ranch. It's located in north central South Dakota, and we're here to look at how we assess soil health on rangeland. So I'm really excited about what we're going to see here, and let's go see what we got.
I grew up on a farm and ranch. I went to college at Michigan for 2 years and then came back and then farming and ranching ever since. We farm and ranch big. We do cover crops and no-till and try to keep the cows grazing as much of the year as possible and trying to improve soil health and capture every drop of water that we get. We farm about 10,000 acres and then we ranch about 10,000 acres. We run about 700 mama cows. We've got all black Angus cross cows now, bred Hereford bulls to get a black-white based calf. So we kind of are seeking out, value added or ways to improve the bottom line in order to stay profitable and competitive. Dad they dissed and drilled for forever, and before that it was plowing and cultivating and summer fallow, and they would watch the soil blow away. Eventually no-till came into play in the 90s. Some guys just started to realize that we need to do something different. Now we've got a 60-foot drill and a 90-foot planter, and we've got a split system where we can put the fertilizer and the seed down at the same time. Most definitely water savings and just the residue on the soil and capturing every drop that falls out of the sky goes into the soil. So yields have gone up big time. So we'll do spring wheat, oats, rye, corn, sunflowers. We used to do chickpeas. We just introduced soybeans into the operation. I think it's a matter of trying to find a balance between the low carbon nitrogen crops and the high carbon to nitrogen crops. So we try to grow more grasses, the cool and warm season grasses, and then just a few broadleafs. We try to get a cover crop on almost every small grain acre, like our wheat, spring wheat, oats, rye ground. All those will get cover crops. It's been shown that the more species, the more diversity, the better they do. But the big thing, besides breaking up compaction and grabbing nutrients down low and bringing them up to the surface and holding on to them for next year's crop, is to feed the cows. We'd just as soon the cows be out grazing in the wintertime and feeding themselves than us taking them bales of hay. Yeah, less tractor hours, less man hours. Hay is, well, it's going for over $200 a ton right now. We easily paid for the cover crop seeding and the plant, and the seed itself and the planting. There's no doubt. And my husband, everything we do with the cows needs to be able to pay for itself, and he's a believer in it. Yeah, they distribute their own manure. We don't have to go haul manure out to the fields. The biggest thing is keeping the soil armored, preferably reduced tillage or no-till. But even no-till is not enough. I mean, we did a water infiltration test on some of our no-till fields, and they've got a really platy structure just from all the years of just too much compaction. You got to be careful with a lot of those things, and cows can cause compaction too. If you leave them out there for too long, or we tend to put the cows on the fields after it's frozen, that's when you got to be careful of going out in any field, is when it's too wet to be out there. That's when you do the most damage. I think there are some benefits that you can see right away. I mean, you'll see the benefits and the cost savings and the switching from tillage to a no-till system. You'll see a lot of cost savings. We typically have cows on the grass from March till November, and then we try to get them out on all the fields. So they're either grazing cover crops, corn stalks, sunflower stalks, and we've got most of our fields fenced and watered now where we can do that. I think we've got 17 pastures out there, and so we're rotating about once a week is what we're shooting for. That's what the goal was when we started. I just wanted to move cows every Monday for grassland health and species, and so the grass can regrow. A short duration of high impact is what we're going for, and then a long rest and recovery period so that grass has a chance to come back. Feeds the soil big time. Yeah, you want dung beetles, and we're trying to get more of them out here. We quit pouring our cows dewormer and insecticides in the springtime at branding. We don't do that anymore just for that reason, because a lot of our cow pies were getting petrified. They weren't breaking down, they weren't fertilizing the pastures like they should be. It should be a natural system and a continual cycling of nutrients and feeding the soil feeds the cows, and it's all a system, right? But we were seeing cow pies laying out there for 2 or 3 years and not breaking down. Rangeland is this, I mean, same as cropland really. It can be overused and abused, and soil can wash down the creeks, and major erosion and you know, undesirable species, and just it can go backwards as well. So preferably we utilize the cows as a tool. They feed themselves and feed the soil at the same time, so that it's a regenerative process. The grass is a perennial system where it needs the cows. We've made the mistake where I thought letting it rest for a year or more was the best thing to do for it. But then invasive species come in, and we're battling that now. Pastures go backwards if they don't get grazed in a year. Kentucky bluegrass is our main problem because it's a cool season, it gets going early, and that's usually when we have our moisture, and if it's not grazed early, it outcompetes a lot of the warm season grasses, so it's diminishing a lot of the native species and creates a mat so nothing else can grow through it, and it's not helping the soil at all. We know our finances, and we know it's financially a good investment and good use of time and management to rotate cows, and a lot of our neighbors now will rotate occasionally every month or so. Some of them are still continuous grazing all season long. One pasture, one herd. Cows go where they want and eat what they want, but they're always going back to the grass that's regrowing, right? So they're always eating the ones that are the highly desirable plants, or the ones that they're continually eating, and so they're going to get diminished because it's the pressure on that root system doesn't allow it to regrow. We've learned from a lot of other places that we've seen, and the NRCS has been instrumental in helping us build cross fences and get more water on the pasture. And Dad put a pipeline in 89 or 90, and that was the first fresh water a lot of their pastures have had, and they were on dams and dugouts, and he said that added 50 pounds to a calf that first year they had fresh water. It's groundwater, and it pipes through. I think we've got 6 miles of pipeline now. We put a pipeline in each pasture and a tank, and so that the cows, that was our biggest hurdle, was getting water to all where we wanted to put the cows. Well, if they didn't want to make a huge initial investment, I would say get electric fence and train your cows to it, and figure out a portable water system. Feed as little hay as possible, get the cows out on the land, let them feed themselves, preferably. Any opportunity you can to get the cows out on your fields where they can distribute manure and help recycle nutrients and residue is a good thing, as long as you're not out there when it's too wet and doing more damage than you are doing good. I get a little anxious about not getting enough rain and not having enough food for the cows, and so this system has allowed us to, as long as the fire stays away, we can kind of guarantee that we can keep our cow numbers where they are. It's just good to be diversified. I guess that's kind of our main point in crops and cattle and industry and business and all, you know, in order to survive and thrive.
So we're out here today, we're going to look at rangeland health as it relates to soil health. So we're out on rangeland. The soil health principles still apply, but they're kind of applied a little bit differently. And we're going to talk about the differences between soil health and range health and the similarities. And so we're out here on Candace's ranch here, and she's doing some awesome management out here. As you've probably heard, there are 4, maybe 5 soil health principles: minimize disturbance, maximize cover, maximize living root throughout the year, maximize diversity, and then the 5th one, that
integrate livestock.
Integrate livestock, right. With rangeland health, it's a little different methodology, but they're very much interconnected. Rangeland health has what we call 3 attributes, and all the indicators fall under and are tied to those 3 attributes. So you're talking about biotic integrity, hydrologic function, and soil and site stability. And so the indicators we're going to show you today on rangeland are connected to one of those 3 or more than one of those 3 attributes. They're very much related to those 4 principles. If you think about cover is a hydrologic kind of thing, so it relates to hydrologic function. Diversity is a much a biotic integrity kind of thing. The minimized disturbance, that's a soil and site stability kind of issue. And I can go through all of them, but they're all interconnected and tied together. And so we use rangeland health on rangeland to assess soil health. There are 17 indicators of rangeland health. There are 4 indicators amongst those 17 that we kind of focus on when we're looking at soil health on rangeland. There's a lot of indicators on rangeland health that are strictly talking about the plants, but a lot of those relate back to that diversity thing. And I'm going to add too that in my mind on rangeland, the most important soil health principle is that maximize diversity. I think if you can get at that on rangeland, you're going to affect pretty much all the other factors out there. So I like to change the soil health principles on rangeland a little bit. If you look at it from a cropland standpoint, they talk about minimizing disturbance. I talk about optimizing disturbance, because these grasses out here evolved with grazing and fire. Insects, the Rocky Mountain locust was a huge thing out here, and so they need to be utilized. If they're not utilized, they go decadent and they'll become dormant and eventually kind of die out without that use. So you have to use them, but in a good manner, I guess. So you're optimizing that disturbance. Cover is another one. We don't on cropland we talk about maximizing cover. On range, it's more optimizing cover, because in some cases, especially like in areas here where you're affected by Kentucky bluegrass, cover can become too much. In rangeland health, what's kind of a neat thing is there is what we call a reference sheet for every ecological site out here. And that reference sheet tells us what all those indicators should look like, all 17 of those indicators. So when you get to cover, the plant cover and residue cover, it'll tell you on that reference sheet how much cover there should be. So when you measure it, you know if it's too much or too little, and the same thing with bare ground, infiltration. All those indicators have a standard value for this particular ecological site. On your cell phone, you can get to what they call a soil web app, and we can determine what the soils are in this locale right here. And Kent pulled it up, and we found it was in this area. It's a reader Caba, and those are soil names which mean absolutely nothing. So we're on a reader Caba here. The reader in this particular case would be a loamy ecological site. Caba would be a shallow loamy. So Caba is shallow to bedrock, which is 20 inches or less to bedrock. Reader is going to be deeper than 20 inches. That information is going to guide you to the right reference sheet to do these evaluations. So we dug a hole close to 20 inches. We pull out a profile, and then we just start looking at some of those indicators. We dug a hole about down to 20 inches, and then I usually pull a profile out of the side of the hole. We kind of break it apart and start seeing what kind of structure we see and other characteristics. One of the things you're going to look for is what we call structure, and that's the natural structure that we're seeing in these soils. I brought a structure kit. These are some soil structures. So what we're looking at is different structures that you'll find in soil. So granular structure is one of the, this is what we would consider a good structure, but it's basically what it sounds like. It's kind of granular. In the old days, they called it crumb. In our prairie soils, we expect 99% of the time really to find a granular structure in the surface. Usually below that, what you'll get into is probably what we call blocky. Many times they call it subangular blocky structure. And that's going to be, as you move down into the profile, you're going to start to see that kind of structure. And you're seeing it right here too. Yep. Thanks, Kent. So it's the same thing you're seeing over here. There's another structure here, though, I want to talk about that is really common in pretty well-developed soils, and that's what we call prismatic structure. See how these columns of soil come out? That's prismatic. And so that's what that's showing is this soil is very well developed. We start out with granular structure in the surface here. If I break some out, get some roots off. But you can see the granular structure in there. It's so dry it's kind of breaking into powder too, but there's granules right there. You can see them. Then it goes to prismatic structure, and they call it parting to blocky. So what they mean is when you break it apart, this prismatic structure, it comes apart and is blocky then. So in the upper part of the prismatic column, it's prismatic parting to granular, and then as you go down, it's prismatic parting to blocky.
When we were looking at the structure, we see the nice granular structure we have on the top, and you can see a great evidence of that in the structure kit, and even just right here. But really what creates that granular structure is basically the interaction between plant roots and the biology that's in the soil. And so it's really, they're kind of, I like to give the analogy, they're kind of working to create their own home. It creates pore space, it just creates a good environment for them to live in. So that's really what a lot of it creates, that granular structure. And if we don't see that granular structure, especially in the prairie systems in South Dakota, in the Dakotas, then it's usually evidence of the management. We can usually make a pretty good guess as to what the management is. So if we have those compaction layers, we usually have a pretty good idea of what's going on as far as how they're managing the livestock.
Is that typically in a continuous grazing system?
Yeah, so continuous grazing systems where you start to see the compaction. That's where, like Stan hit on, is the diversity. When you have those continuous systems, you get lower diversity, and the lower diversity just kind of creates that negative snowball effect of starts impacting the soil structure, and then when the soil structure is impacted, then infiltration with precipitation is impacted.
When we look at assessing soil health on rangeland, we're going to do the whole range health assessment. Let me stress that. We're not going to take parts of it out and just do parts of it. But we kind of focus on 4 of those indicators, and there I just go by number: 8, 9, 10, and 11. 8 is aggregate stability, 9 is color and structure, 10 is infiltration, and 11 is compaction. And so we jump to number 9. It doesn't matter what order we do on them. That's usually the first thing I look at when I dig a hole, is that structure. And so, so far it looks good. I mean, we don't have any departure. What we would see if it wasn't managed well, like we mentioned earlier, we'd probably see blocky or platy structure in that surface, but we're not seeing that. So we're in good shape. We just kind of went through number 9, and the part of 9 we did structure. The other part of that one is color, which is kind of a fun one.
Yep. So when it's dry versus when it's wet, will you get the same
good point
result? And does that give you an indicator of like organic matter and soil health too, just the color of it?
Definitely. So a lot of the guides will tell you to just do a moist soil color. But working with the soil health specialist up in North Dakota, and we've talked about this a lot, you want to do a dry color and a moist color. I think sometimes you'll see a departure on the dry color and you won't pick it up on the moist color. So the only tools you need are the shovel and a few simple things that we're showing here. These color books, they're organized into hue pages. So each page is a different hue. We just happen to know that in South Dakota, most of the time we're going to start on this, what is called the 10YR page. And that's just where most of our soils land hue-wise. And then on the bottom across here from 1 to 5 or 6, I guess. Well, actually they skip numbers, so 1 to 8 is the chroma, and up the side, 2 to 8 is the value. All right, so what you do essentially is you just try to find the color chip that matches your soil the closest. So you take a little piece out. And you put it behind the page, and then you just move it to,
That's pretty close. Huh?
that's pretty close.
So you can compare the color, like Stan's doing, with what they identified when they first identified this soil series, like in this county. When this is dry, they would say a 10YR42 is what was typical.
So we're down here at
3.2.
3.3 probably,
darker.
yeah, 3.3.
And so really what we're looking at there with color, a lot of what changed the color within the same soil series, whether it's lighter or darker, is the organic matter. And so as your soil organic matter increases, you would expect the color to get darker within our hue chart there. And so most of organic matter, a good percentage of organic matter in the soil consists of carbon, and carbon in its elemental form is dark black. And so the more of it you have, the darker the soil would be. And so that's something you can kind of use as a base if you're looking at your color and you don't know if it's good, bad, or otherwise. If you can find the typical description for that soil series, and if you're the same, great. If you're lighter, maybe that's room for improvement. And if you're darker, you're probably on the right path.
The color here is not a departure from normal. It's okay, you know, so we don't see any resource concern with soil color. Now we need to do one wet too though.
So when you do it moist, it darkens it up just by adding the moisture to it. And so I would put this one now at a 2.2. We were at a
3.3.
3.3,
2.2.
and moist to be a 2.2.
You can't get any darker than that hardly.
Yep, yeah, just one more is all darker. But, yeah.
So we covered indicator number 9, that is soil structure and color. And that tells us a lot about the organic matter depletion. It also tells us about soil organism habitat loss and degradation, those two resource concerns in particular. And so what we're moving on to now is we're backing up to number 8, and we're going to look at aggregate stability. And the way Rangeland Health talks about it is it's called soil surface loss or degradation is the name of that indicator. But essentially what it boils down to is what is our aggregate stability. This is one of the other methods for that indicator, either on cropland, but definitely on rangeland. It's called the Jornada Soil Aggregate Stability Kit. And Jornada is a ARS station down in New Mexico where it was developed. Basically what we're doing here is we're looking for a soil PED at the surface, and we're going to collect that and put it in one of these little containers, I guess you'd call it, a sieve. And once we place that in there, we're going to put it into distilled water, and then we're going to let it sit for a while, and then we'll dip it and see how strong those aggregates are. That's the process. So what you try to do is kind of remove some of the litter back, and sometimes you have a root mat right at the surface, so we would just say that's a very stable surface. But I'm going to try to show how the process works. Essentially what you do is the kit comes with this little spatula, and you dig 2 parallel lines with the spatula, and then you just dig out like a trench right there. And then on the side wall of the trench, you try to pick up a PED, what we call a soil PED. Okay, so then this PED actually is kind of cute. It's got some lichens on it. So what you do is you try to trim this down, this little soil PED, to the size they prescribe. And that size is right here on the lid. So you want it to be about no more than 1/4 inch in diameter and about 1/8 of an inch thick. And we're just about there. So then you take the soil PED and you just place it in there. And if you talk to the guys that are really technical about it, you're supposed to place it right side up too, so the surface is up. And then we just try to collect a few, I would suggest doing at least 3 to 5 samples. All right, so you put those in there. As with any aggregate stability test, you allow the samples to dry. There's 2 boxes that come with the kit. One's empty and one has the sieves in it. And so you want to get distilled water. A lot of water has, it obviously has chemicals and stuff in it, and it can react with the soil chemicals, and and kind of throw off the test. So it's a good idea to use distilled water, and you just put some water in the other box. You don't have to fill them. If you're only doing 3 to 5 samples, you don't have to fill them all up. Fill it a little over halfway. And then essentially all you do is you take these and you put them in the water, and that's a floater. Try to get them in the water.
And if it floats?
Yeah. There it goes. Sometimes you have to force them down in the water. This one's going to float too, I know it. All right, so then you wait 5 minutes and then you dip it 5 times. And then based on how much soil remains on the sieve, then it gets a ranking. So 50% of the structural integrity is lost within 5 seconds of putting it in the water. It's rated as a 1. 50% is lost within 30 seconds. It's rated as a 2. If it remains fairly intact for the first 30 seconds to 300 seconds, then it's a 3 or better. So after 5 minutes, basically you just take the little sieve out and you go up and down the water. Try not to hit the bottom when you're doing this, or the sides too much, but just go up and down 5 times. I've already lost track how many times I've done it.
That's your 5th.
Okay, that's my 5th, all right. And as you see, I went 5 times with this. It's very, very intact. It didn't lose anything. That means we're rated as a 6. It means our soil surface is very stable. So we're looking good here. Our number 8 indicator, aggregate stability, we're solid.
What we're going to demonstrate and look at now is basically infiltration rate. So what happens when that thunderstorm comes and it dumps a lot of rain on you at once? You know, we're in a drought situation now, but can we take all the rain that's going to come eventually? And what happens if it comes 2, 3, 4 inches at a time, which happens a little more frequently than you would think around here. So, you know, sometimes we say we can create our own drought, and what we mean by that is we get these rainfalls and your ground, your soil isn't prepared or isn't in a state that it can accept all of it, and then when it can't accept all of it, it runs off and then it goes down into a creek, stream, or a ditch, or to a stock dam or something like that. And so we're not making full utilization of it. And so like Candace mentioned earlier, the more water they can infiltrate, the more water they can hold, the more grass they can produce. The more grass they can produce, the better it is for their livestock. And so that's the importance of infiltration. And so what we have for you with this is basically just a rainfall infiltration kit. And it's really simple. It's an aluminum ring. Sometimes it'll be a steel ring. In this case, it's an aluminum ring. And I think it's 5.5 inches diameter. 5.5, 6 inches. And what we do is we pound this into place, and we have it marked on here so it's to the same depth each and every time. And what we're going to do is put the equivalent of a 1-inch rainfall on there, and we time it and we see how fast it infiltrates. Intuitively, we all know that the faster it infiltrates, the better. That's what we want to see. You know, but what is fast? If it goes in 5 minutes, is that good or is that bad? If it goes in 20 minutes, is that good or that's bad? And we'll talk a little bit about that. I've got the sheet. We can talk about different rates. And since it's pretty windy, I'm going to have Stan hold this in place for me. And we have these cups, and they're pre-measured. We just put them up to the lip of the cup, and that's our equivalent of 1 inch. And so we pour it into here. And the reason we pour it on top of this plastic wrap is basically so we're just not disturbing that soil surface when we're just dumping it right on there. And so we can use this and we can gently pull it out, and it just essentially rests on in and without a lot of disturbance. And so what we do is I'm going to pull this plastic wrap out, and Stan's going to start his timer, and we're going to see what happens. Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. And so in different plant communities, and I think Stan's kind of touched on it a little bit and maybe wants to a little bit more, some plant communities, like Kentucky bluegrass, for example, they're not necessarily real conducive to infiltration. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, some plants like Kentucky bluegrass will develop a thick root mat near the surface. and that it kind of captures all the rainfall at near the surface and it won't go down through. The other thing that happens with Kentucky bluegrass with that thatch mat layer is you'll actually see platy structure below the thatch mat layer. So it's a compacted layer below that Kentucky bluegrass root mat, and that inhibits infiltration. So the more diverse the plant community and the better the management, those two things together will result in very good infiltration. So we're doing pretty good. I think we're up to a little over a minute and we're more than halfway soaked in.
It should get in faster than that, shouldn't it?
I get that comment quite a bit if I'm working with producers. They think, oh, it should be going in faster, this isn't good. Well, if you got 1 inch of rain in a minute out here,
It's coming down.
does that ever happen?
It's
I don't
coming
think it can rain that fast.
Yeah.
So really, if this infiltrates within a couple minutes time, it's probably pretty good.
We have reference values for aggregate stability, for soil structure. We also have reference values for infiltration too. So on a loamy site like this, actually anything from 1 second to up to 18 minutes, anything in that range is considered a none to slight departure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so and you think about it, if you get an inch of water in 18 minutes, that's like 3 inches of water per hour. And infiltration is usually measured in inches per hour. But if you can get 3 inches of rain in an hour, that's not too shabby, really. If you don't have an infiltration ring on the range health protocol, there's really two questions you ask. Has the plant community changed from what's expected for the site? That's question one. So this site, we would expect green needlegrass, western wheatgrass, and we have that here. But we do have that component of Kentucky bluegrass. So you'd probably say, yes, it has changed. That's the first question. Second question is, does that change influence infiltration? And we'd say with Kentucky bluegrass, probably it would. But then you go to measuring it and you see, has it actually affected infiltration? And I'm guessing, we're pushing 5 minutes and we're almost done. So we're doing pretty good. If you think how many 5-minute intervals are there in a 60-minute? 12. So 12 minutes, 12 inches per hour infiltration. So we're about 5 minutes. Yep. So we're good. We ended up soaking in an inch of water in 5 minutes and 30 seconds. That's pretty good. When you do the math, that's almost 12 inches per hour of rainfall soaking in. So that's well within our acceptable range for this ecological site as far as saying there's no departure, infiltration's good, we're good to go. So the last of the 4 indicators that we use out of the rangeland health 17 indicators that we kind of focus more on soil health is called compaction. Management-induced compaction means that animals are hitting it enough to where it's causing the soil to lose its cohesiveness or its stability, and it's compacting together, and that is bad for infiltration. It's bad for root penetration. It has a lot of negative impacts on that soil profile and on the plant community and the soil health in general, or range health. And it's a pretty simple indicator to look at. And honestly, on most rangeland, you're not going to see a lot of compaction. It's not super common, but you can see it like under a thatched mat layer, like we were talking about with Kentucky bluegrass. Right under that, you can see platy structure. But it's a very simple indicator to look at. Essentially, we look through our profile that we dug out here earlier, and what you're looking for is that structure change that goes to platy. So when you see these horizontal layers that are platy, what we call platy, in this profile somewhere, that's an indicator of compaction. Now, with management-induced compaction, you're going to see those usually in the top 3 to 4 inches probably. It's not going to be down very deep. And that's really all you do is just look for those platy layers in the soil. There are a few soils that naturally have platy layers somewhere in the profile. And when you read the OSD, which is the official series description for that soil off your app, then you can say, well, this one naturally has it, and you should find them in there. But normally, we don't want to see any of this stuff, these platy layers in our profile anywhere. And the other thing you can notice too is, are the roots going down and then taking a left-hand turn or something, If you see the roots actually hitting a barrier, that's another indication, but pretty simple to do, really.
So this is the pasture that we were in for a week, and we left on Friday 4 days ago and came to this one. There's about 350 cows in it, and then we'll go to this pasture next. Neither of these have had cows in them yet this year. So we'll just continue to rotate around. I think we left them in this one a little bit too long for our grazing, for our growing conditions with no rain.
So do you have kind of a drought plan that you kind of, when the drought comes, you kind of change your management?
I guess the purpose why we put in all these cross fences and extra tanks was in preparation for a drought.
Gotcha.
That was always in the back of our mind, because in the past we've had to ship cows out to go somewhere else during a drought, or just run out of grass and fence fields. And so we wanted to kind of drought proof ourselves. So that's the goal, is to manage them so that the grass can rebound quicker and get a better head start on the cows. And so we have grass at the end of the growing season.
In most years, do you are you able to go on to like a cover crop or a crop residue to pick up some of that?
Yep, usually in November, October, November, depending on how things are and where crops are.
Okay.
We were planting cover crops the last couple days following rye harvest. So that'll put a cover crop on all the wheat and the rye and the oats ground after harvesting. So
having kind of incorporated that into your whole system, how much time or how much money either one do you think you've saved on what you probably would have done or used to do with feeding everything in the wintertime?
Last winter, with an open winter where they were able to graze and utilize the cover crops and the rye, we cut our feed costs at 75%.
Wow.
For more.
Yep. Okay, so we're wrapped up here on Candace Mizera's ranch. We've looked at soil health on rangeland, and we've looked at aggregate stability and soil color and soil structure.
And compaction and infiltration rate.
So thanks for joining us today. You can get a ton more information on our website.